Kate Davis, deputy editor of Fast Company magazine. She is the host of the New Way We Work podcast, Fast Company's podcast about all things work. And they just did a 4-part series where across America, across all demographics, mothers and daughters talk about things that have happened in the workplace and things that they've noticed in the workplace. And it is a very raw documentary, this 4-part series. And I was glad that Kate was available to walk us through it. And Kate Davis from Fast Company joins me. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm great. I just got done binging your Ambition Diaries series, and from one guy who creates audio to a woman who creates audio, there's a lot of work that went into this, Kate.
Yes.
Congratulations. Number one on just getting done, but number two on a job well done. Tell me how many people were involved in this project, because I know it wasn't just you. There's a team of people who had to have made this audio.
So this was a project, I will say, I've been thinking about a version of this project for years and years and years and years. And the catalyst for finally doing it was the news that women's labor workforce participation was set back a generation. Because of COVID, 5.4 million women left the workforce. And I really wanted to look at what that meant across generations for mothers and daughters. So we partnered with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. They helped us find some reporters and they paid for some of it. But we contracted with 7 reporters from across the country, all sorts of different places in the country. And they conducted these interviews with 7 groups of mothers and daughters, so 14 women, again, from across the country, across demographic lines, socioeconomic lines. Like, we really tried to get a good representation of America. That's
what I was thinking. When you talk about diversity, this is not like corporate checkbox diversity. We're going to talk about some corporate BS as we have this discussion, because in episode 2, you go through a lot of corporate BS. But this is not checkbox diversity. Like, you have women from the entire spectrum.
Yes. Yeah. We have immigrants from Malaysia. We have Black women from the South, from Chicago. We have LGBTQ women from the Pacific Northwest. We have the Midwest. We have, we really tried to, and they work in education and sales and in HR. Like, we really tried to get a good representation. I mean, you can't be exhaustive, but I'm very proud of the
income levels
diversity.
too.
Yes.
Income, savings, that kind of thing too.
Yep. But yeah, so we started the hunt for these groups of these pairs of women beginning of 2022, January, February time.
Wow.
We conducted the interviews in the summer, actually conducted the interviews about the time that Roe got overturned, which is an interesting backdrop as well. And then poured through hours and hours and hours and hours of transcripts to get these, what my producer Josh Christensen calls them, kind of audio poems, like these beautiful little moments where you hear the mothers and daughters say, oh, I've never heard you tell that story before, or I'd never really thought about it until we're having this conversation. And that was really what I was hoping for. Is at Fast Company, we report on these statistics, we report on this, this economic part of it and this influence so much, but you don't hear what it's really like inside people's lives. And so that's what I was hoping to capture with Ambition Diaries. We put together a 4-part miniseries, kind of each episode has a different theme. I'm the host, and I, kind of stitched it all together. Like I said, we have my wonderful producer, Josh Christensen, that really was my partner in, like, how the hell do we shape this mountain of information into something cohesive? And then we have a sound engineer that also just really made it sound beautiful as well.
Yeah, because people hear this and they think, oh, that took a few minutes. I mean, before I started doing podcast, I thought, oh, that's neat. And the number of hours that goes in behind the scenes, the fact that you start at the beginning of this year is amazing. But let's talk for a second about these mothers and daughters, Kate, because the bravery to tell some of these stories that you have never told your mom before, you've never told your daughter before, to tell them with the microphone running. Like, how hard was it to get these women to open up the way they do?
So I really give, so we didn't get to be there, right? Because it's all across the country. We really found these amazing audio journalists and it takes a lot of pre-interviewing, right? So they each had to pitch us two potential pairs of mothers and daughters that they already got comfortable with, already understood their story, really kind of got their background. And then we're like, okay, you know, this one fits with what we're trying to, you know, their background kind of fits with what with the points we want to hit. But then it's like the luck of the draw. Like, are they going to open up? Are they going to give, you know, you the great stories? And the job of the reporter then is to kind of like prompt them and get out of the way and hopefully fade to the background. Because you don't hear the reporters on any of these conversations. It's just the conversations between the mothers and daughters. And I think hopefully they did kind of forget the reporter was there and they just had these conversations. And I think because it's mothers and daughters, you get this realness that you don't get when it's just like a reporter talking to somebody.
You talk at the beginning of the project. The very first episode is called "The Broken Promise of the American Dream." You open up, Kate, with really how personal this is. That a lot of the decisions that you've made in your life are based on the socioeconomics of the family that you were born into. Tell me about how personal this was and really your own story getting into this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, part of why I've been thinking about a project like this for so long is I thought about how different my career turned out, you know, and my life turned out than my mother and my grandmother. And, you know, my mom was a single mom and, you know, I grew up very aware of our circumstances and we actually heard, you know, and that really informed where I went to college, which then informed my access to alumni networks, my, you know, ability to get different jobs. And we heard that, you know, kind of similar story because I thought, you know, clearly this isn't just me. What does this look like in other people's lives? And we heard this beautiful similar story from one of the mothers, Demita, talking about growing up in poverty and having a winter coat that didn't zip up all the way. And she just has this quote of, I remember being so cold that winter. And that moment defined how she then raised her children and how she talked to her children about career options. So in which I really related to of she wanted to be a dancer and she's like, that's not a practical career. I need to work in HR and get something practical and just make money. And their whole kind of way that she thought about and then subsequently her daughter thought about work was a means to an ends. Then meanwhile, contrast that to Janelle and Kylie. Janelle worked at Microsoft in Seattle. They were very comfortable. The way that she talked to her daughter about career and money and those decisions were, you know, do something that's important to you and that matters. And that she had this kind of access and freedom in thinking about work and career because money wasn't a means to an end, wasn't a survival.
The title of the episode is "The Broken Promise of the American Dream." And the American dream, I think, based on when I hear the words American dream, and this kind of Horatio Alger, right? People not born with the same circumstances, but there's the ability to pull yourself up, that one family can pull themselves up and the other one can't. What's broken?
I mean, I think that whole notion is broken. I always think of the George Carlin quote. It's called "The American Dream" because you have to be asleep to believe it. Like it's, you know, right? Because it's true. Like the notion that like it does. I mean, and I feel like we all kind of realize this, right? Like the notion of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It doesn't matter. You can do it. Like, no, if you're one person starting, you know, 100 yards further to the finish line than you are, they have access to, and we, you know, when we cover this a lot at Fast Company, they have access to a different pipeline to different universities, which then lead to different you know, alumni networks and career opportunities. And it doesn't, you know, being smart only and working hard only gets you so far if you start, you know, in a disadvantaged place.
The part of the American dream that I think older people don't understand are some of the things that younger people face. Like even in our community, when we have, you know, fights on social media. I know that never happens, fights on social media, but believe it or not, once in a while there is.
Oh no, I'm a woman in media on Twitter. I've never encountered that. Never encountered it. No. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? Oh yeah, Twitter. That's not a dumpster fire at all, right there. No. So, but I often find it's older people saying, well, when I was your age, I did this thing. Yep. And when I was your age, I did that. And this is not a problem because all you got to do is, you know, buckle down and get things done. And you have a great discussion here about one of those key issues, which is home ownership. Yep. And I'd like to play a clip from your series from the Ambition Diaries on the New Way We Work. This is Christina talking to her mom about the importance for her of owning a home.
Yep. The daughters we spoke to for Ambition Diaries are in their 30s, a point that many of their parents were able to own their own homes. But they find themselves at jobs that don't pay as much as they expected, struggling to pay off student loan debts, and contending with rising housing prices, mortgage rates, and the worst inflation in a generation. This is the case for Christina, a teacher from Lithonia, Georgia, who spoke with her mother, Vicky, who also lives in Lithonia, about how hard purchasing a home has been for her with student loan debt. It has been a lifelong dream of Christina's to buy a home for herself.
In becoming a homeowner, it was just to create what I received in growing up. Our house may not have been big, but it was so full of love. It was fun. And even to hear my cousins always want to come over, our house was always flooded with people because the atmosphere was great. And it made me just, I'm at that age where I want to continue to do that. And I've had a hiccup. In becoming a teacher, I had to take out some loans that impacted my process, especially a couple of years ago when I had the townhouse, and the week before closing day, it just fell apart. And I was crying, saying to myself, maybe if I would have went to a cheaper school, and you kept saying, no, it'll be okay. And it put a damper, I have to be honest, it put a damper on my dreams in becoming a homeowner, because I will never forget my best friend told me, you're going to experience every emotion through this process. And I was like, oh, no. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm already going through the pandemic, teaching through the pandemic. But my student loan debt is like always a focus in my mind. And I know you always tell me not to worry about it because you are where you are. You are doing what you love. And I know my student loan debt is like always a focus in my mind. And I know you
I love how she acknowledges the encouragement from mom, but there's so many different things here, Kate, for us to dig into. Number one is the phrase she says, I had a hiccup. And you can hear the blame that she has in herself, right? A lot of these people in your interviews are blaming themselves when they don't realize how many millions of people going through the same thing, which means this is probably much more systemic than she even knows.
Well, because we frame it as a society like that, right? It's like a personal responsibility, and like you're just fed this belief that if you do the right things, then you'll be on the same path. And what you said earlier, it's not the same for generations, especially, take student loan debt. College did not cost what it did in these mothers' generations, in the boomer generation. You do hear a lot of boomers say, well, I, don't have college debt, or I managed to do this. And it's like these people, she's a teacher. She graduated with student loan debt, and now she's making whatever a teacher's salary in Lithonia, Georgia is, which is probably not very high. She's going to be paying, and my mother's a retired nurse, and she worked with nurses who were paying off their student loan debt when they were putting their own kids through college. Like, it's a legacy of debt, and it sets you back so far. And then, it's this perfect storm right now, right? Where mortgage rates are so high, inflation's so high, like all of these things are stacked against, millennials and Gen Z, and which no wonder, and I mentioned this in the podcast, marriage rates, homeownership rates, having children, all of those are much, much lower for this generation because it's just impossible.
Yeah, we're going to talk here in a second with episode 2 about specifically on women. We talked to Professor Scott Galloway a few weeks ago about the effects on young men, like men, women affecting everybody and in different ways. Women definitely we'll get into here in a second. I want to talk about being a teacher, though. Like when I was growing up, just talking about the difference. Kate, when I was growing up, if you were a teacher, you were easily a homeowner. Mm-hmm. Like you were. I mean, teacher equals the white picket fence. I'm a member of my society, a member of my community. Of course I own a house. And now we talk about every teacher that we know, every young teacher really struggling.
Yeah. And, and I will say my father-in-law was a teacher, and he retired in his 50s, I believe, which is like something that was kind of common, right? Like having a pension and retiring. And you're right, like having these stable, careers that led to homeownership and then retirement. And believe me, retirement is not even on the radar for this generation. You know, we a lot of millennials and Gen Z think that it's something that, you know, rightfully so, like maybe won't happen for them.
I find myself all the way through the series, you know, asking myself, what are the solutions? And of course, there's solutions around voting, around being involved in your community, things that once again, we were talking to Scott Galloway about how involvement in all those areas is going down, which is incredibly disturbing, right? We need to be involved in our community. We need to vote. We need to take part. But even on a personal basis, I also found myself, as I'm listening to you in these wonderful interviews, I think we need to give each other a little grace, right? Like, I don't understand what my sister's going through, and I need to be have a little bit more empathy for each other. Would you say that's a big theme that kind of we have here in this series?
Yeah. And I mean, especially and so the third episode is about work-life balance and career and family. And something, you know, throughout that was really how, you know, if we really want to talk about like what working women need, they need supportive partners who will, like, you know, pick up the slack. And that, you know, that was happening a lot in that episode of being the default parent and everything kind of falling on women. You know, and some of those issues are
the unpaid work.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the unpaid work
yeah.
piece.
It's, you know, it falls to before the pandemic, two spouses both working, it still fell to the women. You know, during the pandemic, even more so, the amount of unpaid hours that women were working. So, you know, in one part, it starts at the home, and the other part, it starts at work with, you know, managers and leadership being truly actually more flexible. But really the biggest solves for those things are, you know, on a public policy level. Like, we are not investing in childcare. And that is, you know, that is the thing that gets the next generation, starts to get them on, you know, more of a level playing field, but also gets the working women of this generation able to participate in the workforce, because that's a big reason why so many women left during the pandemic was they had to, you know, they made less money. So they had to be the ones to scale back their careers to care for their family.
Yeah, I felt bad. I felt like listening to that, the unpaid work at home is not getting done. There's nobody else picking up the slack, so they have to sacrifice their career so that the other member of the family can make money. I mean, in some ways it's a partnership, but it definitely, when you go through the numbers in the there's not a lot of empathy. I think not enough empathy for what women are going through in the workplace.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not one solution, but it is something that they are all kind of intertwined, right? Like the pay gap means that women are being paid less, means that they are the one that's going to have to scale back their career, means that they're the ones that leave the workforce, means that they, you know, like it just keeps going.
Yeah. It's dominoes. It's absolutely dominoes. Speaking of dominoes, I'm listening to some of this, Kate, and of course, there's so many emotions that I have, but one is, it's freaking 2022, and why haven't we solved some of these issues? I'm going to play a clip from episode 2 called "Still Not Equal." This is Francesca talking about an issue I thought would have been solved long ago, which is pregnancy and women hiding pregnancies from their employer. Let's listen to just a little bit of Francesca's story.
Towards the end of my time there, we had some pregnant women. And man, the comment, first of all, we didn't even have a maternity leave policy. That had to be made then. And it was basic. It was like 3 months of leave, but only 2 weeks were paid. And the comments that those pregnant women received from other people, especially those in leadership, that of maternity leave being a vacation, or when we had to extend a reasonable accommodation for a pregnant woman, well, we might as well fire her. We're just giving away money for free. I even had several women who were scared to announce their pregnancy.
That was very, very common.
They were scared to announce their pregnancies because they were in fear of losing their jobs or being mistreated or disciplined because of now being pregnant.
I remember very often hearing if somebody announced they were pregnant again.
Also, I want to make a comment about how when you are trained in this kind of structure, you often become a perpetrator yourself. And I have seen, like, for instance, we had one pregnant woman tell her boss that she was pregnant. And just because she had a baby the year prior, that woman boss asked her if she was sure she wanted to keep it. The sexism, the racism.
That was such a, like when she said, when you're trained in this system, you become a perpetrator yourself. And like you hear her talking to her mother, and her mother is what, like 30 years older than her. And she's like, yep, same thing happened. Like nothing's changed. Yeah.
Scared to announce your pregnancy.
So common.
And
so common. Yeah.
Well, and this is the thing. And once again, you know, you talked about public policy, but being a show that really focuses on what we can do, like with our two hands right now, obviously getting involved is important. I just think that for business owners, Kate, understanding the cost of replacing an existing employee with a new one, we underestimate that cost because she's talking about, we'll just fire her. And I've gone through those numbers. Firing that person.
Well, which by the way is illegal. By the way is illegal. Exactly. But also is something that's still commonly done, even though it is illegal.
Yes.
They find ways to like, oh, it was for this or for that other reason. Yeah, yeah. But no, you're right. Yeah, the cost in replacing an employee is so high. Also, there's been so many studies that working parents and working mothers are better, more valuable, more productive employees. I will tell you, there is nobody on earth more productive than a mom whose kid is napping. Like the amount, like you just have to, like what you can get done. And but the bias is still the other way, right? And we've covered this a lot. There's a thing called the motherhood tax and the fatherhood bonus. When a mother still, again, even though it's 2022, when a woman becomes pregnant, it's like, oh, she's going to be less involved with her work. She's going to be less serious. And, you know, bosses start to give the women less opportunities, all of those things. When a man becomes a father, oh, he has to provide for his family. He's going to be more serious now. Let's give him more opportunities. Like it's 1950 and the father's the breadwinner and the mother's going to leave her job. Yeah.
It's amazing. The women who run this show, and we have three women that really, I'm a puppet. Three women who run this show, all moms. Absolutely amazing, and their ability to do so many different things. If any of these women at any point need time off, like I would be so much worse off trying to finagle how to get. And by the way, the toxicity you create when you find these ways, like listen to how toxic both mom and daughter are talking about these workplaces. Right. And then do you even give 100%? Even if you show up, do you give 100%? Like, I don't know. I don't understand that mentality.
But that whole hiding the pregnancy thing, you know, one is really common and two extends beyond that. We've covered at Fast Company and we've talked to women who hide the fact that they have kids. So even if it's not that they were pregnant when they have the job, they don't mention that they have kids. They're going to a dentist appointment and, you know, you make up like other reasons if you have to leave. You don't have pictures of your kids. Like, seriously, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah. It is the Ambition Diaries, as I think everybody can tell from my voice. I was very moved by this series, and it's available wherever you listen to finer podcasts, right, Kate?
Yes. Yep. The New Way We Work is the name of the podcast. Ambition Diaries was a 4-part miniseries that we ran this fall. The New Way We Work covers exactly what it sounds like, the future of work, all of the things that we're kind of thinking about and talking about all the time. And yeah, this series is part of it.
One of my favorite episodes, and I think you replayed it back in September or October again, is from late last year, and it's about why your boss sucks. And it was
yes, I think the title is Why Your Boss Is So Bad at His Job. Yep.
Right. I like my title better.
Why Your Boss is tomato. Yep.
Yes. If you need consultants at Fast Company, I'm available, Kate. Kate Davis, thanks for talking today about the series, and congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.